Hey everyone, Zian over here from Nintendo Life, and today we're here to share with you our review of Fantasian Neo Dimension on the Nintendo Switch. Now, this review was originally written by Alana Hagues for NintendoLife.com, but was reworked into this video by me. Hironobu Sakaguchi needs no introduction. The father of Final Fantasy is an industry titan, arguably untouchable in the video game pantheon, but since 2004, Sakaguchi has been at the helm at Mistwalker, his development studio, which has a knack for slightly twisting the traditional turn-based RPG affair. Over the years, we've seen that in Blue Dragon, Lost Odyssey, and The Last Story. The studio's latest game, Fantasian, fits that mold, but it also feels slightly different. Sakaguchi admits that he was inspired to make Fantasian after replaying Final Fantasy VI on stream, reminding him how much he loved the genre. We've waited over 3 years since the two-part Apple Arcade release, but now console gamers can experience Sakaguchi's ambitious project with Fantasian Neo Dimension. A game with flashes of brilliance, including a beautiful world and rewarding combat, but held back by uneven pacing, brutally long encounters, and a lackluster story. Sakaguchi may be the lead writer and Nobu Uematsu may be the composer, but Fantasian is crucially not Final Fantasy. While there are structural and thematic similarities, particularly to Final Fantasy VI, this really is a culmination of Sakaguchi's work up until now, and a love letter to the classic RPG genre. Neo Dimension is pretty much the same as the Apple Arcade release. The visuals have been touched up slightly, full English and Japanese voice acting has been added, you can swap battle tracks to various Final Fantasy tunes from some pixel remasters and more modern entries, and there's a new normal mode difficulty. The Apple Arcade version was notoriously difficult, particularly in Part 2, and normal mode helps soften the blow a little bit. Narratively, the game is fairly uneven. Leo, the protagonist, has amnesia. You start your adventure trying to piece together Leo's memories while attempting to get rid of a mechanical infection spreading across the land called Mechteria. Eventually, it becomes a dimension-hopping adventure that tackles themes of family, power, and godhood. One of the biggest problems is a consequence of that original two-part split. The first 20 hours of Fantasian might be steady, but events propel you between locations and towns at a fairly rapid pace, meeting new characters at almost every location. The remaining 40 to 50 hours blow that structure apart in favor of a searching for friends setup where you can revisit locations in any order to reunite the party and gain new allies. This means you can stumble into quests and areas that are extremely out of your depth, and as a result of the open structure, the plot grinds to a halt and certain characters get swept aside, including the main character, Leo. What helps elevate the story is the memory system. These are short, narrated stories that tell you about a character's past in the form of text and images. If you've played Lost Odyssey, they're identical to Kaim's 1,000 Years of Dreams. While not the same writing quality as those, they're still beautifully presented, and some have real emotional weight. Where the narrative missteps, however, the world does not. Fantasian Neo Dimension isn't a visual powerhouse, but it is absolutely gorgeous, largely thanks to the world design. Made up of over 160 handcrafted dioramas, which were then photographed and converted into 3D models, you can see the painstaking amount of work that's gone into each building or object. Glass looking fragile to the touch, and leaves glisten delicately in the sunlight. Coupled with the 3D character models, it captures the essence of those pre-rendered backdrops we all remember from the PlayStation days, and aside from some wonky controls every time the camera angle shifts, it makes for a truly magical world to explore. You'll noodle around every nook and cranny and easily get lost in the visuals, and Uematsu's soundtrack is the perfect accompaniment. It's not his best work by any stretch. The main battle theme is pretty repetitive, but there are some true highlights, such as the Water Towns theme, the beautiful vocal tracks, and the techno-style robot boss music. For the most part, the game looks and runs great. When the camera zooms in, some backgrounds look incredibly blurry up close, which is a holdover of the Apple Arcade version. Luckily, things run at a smooth 60 frames per second with CGI cutscenes and special attack animations capped at 30 frames per second. There are a few more isolated and significant dips in performance, however. One early section focusing on the cruise ship and Sandstorm chugs, and later when you get to control the ship on the world map, controls and animations are choppy. This being a classic style RPG, you can bet there are tons of random encounters. Combat in Fantasian is turn-based, with your typical list of attacks and skills that consume MP, and a turn order indicating which character or enemy will go next. You could swap characters in and out for free too. All attacks have different areas of effect. Some spells can be curved around the area to hit a line of enemies at the back, while other attacks target all enemies in a small circular area. Almost all enemies have an elemental weakness or status susceptibility as well, meaning every single encounter has a level of strategy to it. Random encounters are only part of the story though, as once you've fought an enemy in an area, if you run into them again, they'll be transported inside the Dimension, a device that stores monsters. Instead of fighting groups of 4 or 5 enemies, you can store up to 30 enemies, and eventually 50, and fight them all at the same time. It's incredibly satisfying and addictive to wipe out huge groups of enemies in waves like this, rather than deal with slower encounters one by one. While we largely love the combat, we found ourselves getting frustrated in the latter hours because there's a distinct lack of variety in normal enemy encounters and character skills. You do eventually unlock skill trees called growth maps, which allow you to spend skill points to increase stats, teach your party new attacks, and make abilities more powerful, but a few characters have overlapping abilities and most spells and skills are just variants of other skills. The Dimension even as well suffers from repetition, largely because it just fills up way too fast in the late game, even if you fully expand it. And while you can turn it off or empty it at a dedicated machine for a fee, that means you'll be dealing with smaller, less rewarding fights, also hampered by the fact that above level 35, the experience you gain is drastically decreased if you fight monsters at a lower level than you. The strategic combat all comes to a head in the game's boss battles, and there are lots of them. Every single boss, particularly in the Part 2 sections, is like a puzzle, each requiring a specific strategy or variation of a strategy to defeat it. Sometimes you're nudged towards these by the game, while other times you'll have to die over and over again to figure out whether you're missing a skill, elemental attack, or an element-resistant piece of equipment to help get you through it. Fortunately, you can respec your growth map at any time, but not being able to change equipment and gems during a fight feels unnecessary. And it's here where the difficulty comes into play, particularly in the optional fights. Make no mistake, there are some fights you'll encounter in side quests that are flagged at level 47, but unless you play perfectly, you'll absolutely need to be at a higher level in order to take them out. We even played half the game in hard mode, and bosses that would normally be simply dangerous would one-shot us if we made a single mistake. This is absolutely a combat-oriented RPG before a story one, and those who love a challenge will probably love Fantasian, but even the easier solutions can require patience and practice. If that sounds like your bag, then Neo Dimension is an extremely rewarding adventure. Fantasian Neo Dimension is Hironobu Sakaguchi and Mistwalker at their boldest and bravest, culminating in a JRPG love letter that both delights and frustrates. The stunning world and exploration are a true highlight, and the challenging and rewarding combat will enchant some, but it lacks some of the magic that the game is aiming for, and the pacing is uneven. Normal difficulty makes things more accessible for the curious, but make no mistake, this is an RPG for those who want to lose themselves in the mechanics, first and foremost. We here at Nintendo Life give Fantasian Neo Dimension on the Nintendo Switch a 7 out of 10. If you'd like to check out our full written review, you can find that along with more news and information on Fantasian and other Sakaguchi projects over at nintendolife.com. Let us know if you've played Fantasian on Apple Arcade already, or if you've had your eyes on this game for a while and have been hoping it would come to Switch. Maybe you even saw that video where I covered this 3-4 years ago and I had those same hopes. Thank you all so much for watching, and thank you again to Alana for spending all of that time with Fantasian for this review. I'm Zion from Nintendo Life. Stay safe out there, and we will see you all next time.